Hey, Shalom. Let's begin this lesson by giving all praise, glory, and honor due to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, or QADASH. Double honors to the elders, the bishops, and the apostles of the great millstone who taught me this truth. I want to thank the Most High YAHAWAH, YAHAWASHI, for giving me the inspiration to do this epistle, the Holy Spirit, the RAWCHAA, QADASH, and the Paleo Hebrew tongue to do this lesson. Heavenly Father's will, this lesson will be comforted and exhorting to the elect. This is going to be a very brief epistle through the spirit and power of Yahawah Bashmi Shai. This is your brother, YAHAWAH. So this lesson here is inspired by this article I was reading a few minutes ago. And it's from the RT News, Russian Today News. And it says, Orban vows to defy outrageous EU migrant quotas. And Orban is the current prime minister of Hungary. The Hungarian prime minister, his name is Viktor Orban, and Hungary is a part of NATO. So he says he vows to defy outrageous EU migrant quotas. Okay, let's get into this article here, because a lot of these European nations, what they do is they have mass influx of immigration, and what it does, it is a multi-factor, because first of all, let's get to the nitty-gritty of it. It at first, bringing all these migrants, it caused a bit of a strain on the system, on the economy. The people get upset. They blame immigrants because they're taking the jobs. They work for less. They work harder. A lot of them they work in these countries like they call it under the table, where they're making cash amounts of money. And they say, oh, they come from these other nations, these third world countries, but they don't adhere to the laws of the European nation. So it pisses the people off. You know, it pisses especially Edom, because he's the one generally have the most problem with all the so-called immigrants. But he is the true immigrant. But nevertheless, all you see from Germany to France to Italy to Canada to America, all these countries are what? They're having the same, they're sounding the same echoes, where they're blaming the immigrants for the current problems that they're sustaining. So let's get into this article here, and I'll bring out a few things here and we'll close it. Like I said, this lesson doesn't have to be very long, but it says, Viktor Orban vows to defy outrageous EU migrant quotas. And it just goes to show you that who's calling the shots behind these things, because they want the chaos. They want the division. They always want someone to blame. And it's always, I always say through the spirit, the easiest demographics to blame is a so-called immigrant. These are the talking points of these devils. This is what they like to do. Always blame someone for their problems. Anyhow, let's get into it. It says, the Hungarian Prime Minister has denounced a pact that forces the members of the bloc to take in newcomers or pay 20,000 euros per refusal. Are you listening to this? This is a way, of course, them trying to force these nations already struggling to take in more people. It says the Hungarian Prime Minister has denounced a pact that forces the members of the bloc to take in newcomers or pay 20,000 euros per refusal. Hungary will not comply with EU, which EU stands, in case you didn't know, the European Union. Hungary will not comply with EU requirements to take in immigrants. Starting from next year, Prime Minister Viktor Orban has said, blasting Brussels for launching an absurd and unjust attack on his country. See, all these people, they vow what? Like I said, especially the mass immigrations, But let's get to something. Let's get to this article here. I want to show you something here. An article here. So I went to the chat, and I use the chat mostly, just to see the talking points of this AI system. Because if you ask it the right question, sometimes you may have to dig deeper, but if you ask the right question, it's gonna spill the beans. So I said, what benefit does European nations, I already knew the answer, I just want to see what it's gonna say. It says, what benefit does European nations have when they get a mass amount of immigrants at a time, right? And it says, European nations can experience several economic, demographic, and cultural benefits. It goes on to say, when they receive a large number of immigrants, especially if integration is managed well. But they know, first of all, these countries can't even manage their own. How are they going to manage a large group of newcomers to the country? It's never received well. I always use the example, you know, most of the time people who have like you have kids or you have pets, and you have 4 and 5 children, or you have 4 and 5 different breeds, species of dogs, to introduce new to the mix, there's always some type of fighting and some type of a pecking order, so to speak. It brings a lot of contention at first. But anyways, nevertheless, I digress. It says European nations can experience several economic, demographic, and cultural benefits when they receive a large number of immigrants, especially if integration is managed well. Here are the main advantages. And here's the point now. It says fill-in labor shortages. A lot of these jobs, these so-called Europeans do not want to do. They're too prideful to do these jobs. Sometimes they can't do these jobs, so they get outsiders, pay them cheap labor, hard, intense jobs, you know, whether it's mining, you know, whether it's doing road repair work, you know, a lot of the jobs that is like they puffed up at, they don't want to do. It says fill in labor shortages. Many European countries like Germany, Italy, and Spain have populations shrinking workforces. And it's no I'm surprised they didn't have France on this list, but it shows you that places like Germany, France, Italy, a lot of these places are they're complaining, like they got places like they look like slums. And there's this guy, can't think of his page right now, but anyways, never matter. It's this Edomite. He goes around to various cities in Europe, and he films like the slums, and he's always like putting his camera in the so-called immigrant's face, and he pisses them off, right? It's funny because I took a compilation of his videos, and I put together a little clip, and I put it on my page, and I said watch till the end, because the end of it, he was going around showing all these so-called people that are darker than a paper bag to be the reason why these European nations are crumbling. They look like slums, they look like third world countries. But in the end, it was his people all shooting up needles up their arms. They're all, you know, touching the stuff. So I said watch till the end, the usual suspects, and they gave me a copyright strike for it, you know, because they don't want to be faced their own reality. They don't want people to know that they are a major part of the problem, if not the problem. You know, they destroy people's countries by reaping all the resources, setting up shop, oppressing the people, taking all their stuff, and wonder why people want to come to their countries for a so-called better life. You know, you rape, rob, pillage, steal, constantly exploiting these people, and wonder why these people want to come to your country to have a so-called better life. Make that make sense. But anyhow, let's get back to it. It says many European countries like Germany, Italy, and Spain have aging populations, shrinking workforces. Immigrants help fill jobs in, listen to this now, healthcare, construction, agriculture, transportation, and technology, right? And engineering. Without immigration, some industries will struggle to function. You hear that? Without immigration, some countries some industries will struggle to function. Supporting an aging population. Europe has a low birth rate. See, Europe has low birth rates and a growing retired population. Yes, because a lot of these people here, they can't they gotta go to all these fertility clinics and freezing their eggs and all kind of madness just to just to be fruitful. But Jake and these other nations, they're having 4 and 5 and 6 children, while Esau has like sometimes 1 or none or 2. But the other nation, this is why if you really think about it, they are the true so-called minorities, in the sense of the world, how the world uses it. It says, let's go back here. It says Europe has low birth rates and growing retired population. Yes, that's right. Immigrants increase the number of working age taxpayers. See, because this is how they benefit from it. Because once these people get registered, they get set up and they get I don't know what they call it in various countries, but like a social insurance number. They're part of the system. They become now that slave to that system, because that's what it is. None of us are free. We still have birth certificates, social insurance numbers, all these things, social security numbers. This is why, because they benefit from it. It says help finance pensions and social programs. Yes, help finance their pensions, because people think that these governments have all this money locked away that you put away to your pension, locked away in a vault somewhere, waiting for you to cash in on your pension. It doesn't work like that. A lot of these people don't even reach the pensionable age. Like they're so overworked. Sometimes they have no family. That money goes right back to the system, right back to the government. It says help finance pensions and social programs, keep public services like hospitals staffed and working. Yes, sometimes doing all the Joe jobs, whether it be cleaning, whether it's maintenance, whatever, technician, whatever type of job. Help stabilize local welfare, the local welfare system. See, help stabilize the local welfare system. Look at that. Economic growth. A larger workforce means more productivity, more consumer spending, more entrepreneurship. Immigrants start businesses at high rates, which create jobs and economic activity. They don't want to tell you that. Immigrants start businesses at high rates, create jobs and economic activity. Innovation and skills. Highly skilled immigrants contribute to research and development, tech and scientific fields, universities and engineering sectors. Yes, because they all go to get indoctrinated in these systems. Many European tech hubs rely heavily on foreign talent. This is not what it will tell you, right? Cultural and social contributions. Immigrations can enrich society through new cultures, cuisines, arts, international connections, language, diversity. Cities also become more dynamic and globally connected. See, revitalizing declined regions. Some rural and shrinking towns in Europe suffer from population loss, school closures, fewer businesses. Immigrants can help repopulate those areas, reopening schools and maintaining local economies. Important note, these benefits depend on effective integration policies, economic conditions, social supports, acceptance from local population. See, acceptance from local population. And you already know that these people don't accept so-called immigrants. Anything darker than the paper bag, they don't accept. Especially the Judites, especially the Israelites, the dark-skinned melanated ones. It says poor planning can create challenges, while well-managed immigration can be a major long-term asset. You see, because they know, but you see, poor planning. So this is why I said all that to say this. Let's get back to this article. Viktor Orban, he says, will not comply with EU requirements to take immigration starting from next year. Prime Minister Viktor Orban has said blasting Brussels for launching an absurd and unjust attack on his country. See? Look at this now. Let's get to it. It says the EU Migration Pact, which was agreed upon Monday and is expected to take effect next July, requires every member state to contribute according to its population size and GDP. See? The goal is to ease pressure on the most heavily affected countries. Now listen to this. Namely, Cyprus, Greece, Italy, and Spain, the European Commission said. States must either accept a set of number of migrants relocated from the hotspots or pay 20,000 euros for each, which is roughly 23,000, I believe this is in US, for each person they refuse to take in. As long as Hungary has a national government, we will not implement this outrageous decision. Orban, a longtime critic of Brussels' migration policy, wrote on Tuesday on X, and he's a huge ally. He's a huge, even though he's part of NATO, a good friend to Vladimir Putin. And this is how you're going to show you that how these nations will start to they're already starting to crumble. They're already starting to separate themselves. You see, the kingdom is divided. You see, it tells you in the book of Mark, the 3rd chapter, a kingdom divided cannot stand. A house divided cannot stand. And this is what we are seeing. This is the crippling decay of these European nations. You see, he says, as long as Hungary is a national government, we will not implement this outrageous decision. Orban, a longtime critic of Brussels on migration policy. Let's go to the book of Obadiah. This is Obadiah chapter 1, starting at verse 6. It says, how are the things of Esau searched out? How is his hidden things sought up? By this word, right? It says, this is the point. All of the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. You see how these nations are now what? They're confederate because they're NATO and EU nations. But Orban right now is defying to go against Brussels, to go against that. He is willing to say, hey, and this is why this is beautiful, because YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI is putting the spirit on these nations to what? To separate, causing the division. Tells you in Luke the 12th chapter around verse 51, you know, suppose ye I come to give peace on the earth, I tell you nay, but rather division. The Lord is the one, he is the author of his all, bringing the division for all these nations. It says, all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. See, the men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. Because ultimately, all these nations are what? They gonna, as it says, they shall hate the whore. They're gonna start to separate, and that you already seen, if the Spirit's working with you, you already seeing that these nations are they're so divided. There's a chink, a crink in the armor, you know. As the saying goes in the world, the chain is as strong as the weakest link, and you already start to see the chain is starting to decay. The chain is starting to rust. It's starting to erode, you know. It says, all of the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. You see, it says, they that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is none understanding in him. There is none understanding in him. Yes, this is what the Lord is doing. See, verse 8, shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, even destroy the wise men of Edom? You know, scripture says there's no more wisdom in Teman. Shall I not in that day, saith the Lord, YAHAWAH BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI, even destroy the wise men out of Edom and the understanding out of the mount of Esau? Yes, so the Lord is the one taking away all the benefits. Oh yes, to water YAHAWAH BAHASHAM YAHAWASHI. Let's continue on here. It says, the commission also identify Austria, Bulgaria, Croatia, Czechia, Estonia, and Poland as countries under significant migration strain. Woo! Hungary, however, is not included in that group. So all these nations are suffering right now. Oh, the immigrants, blame the immigrants. But they know without these so-called immigrants, namely Israelites, these countries will be nothing. Yes, I said it. You see? It says Viktor Orban said the assumption that Hungary is unaffected by the migration crisis is completely detached from reality. He noted that tens of thousands attempt to enter the country illegally each year and are stopped by Hungary's border guards and fence system. So he basically put up his barbed wire fence and hire a lot of national security guards to protect the border. In June 2024, the European Court of Justice ruled that Hungary must pay 200 million lump sum, 200 million euros lump sum, plus a daily penalty of 1 million for failing to comply with EU asylum law requirements. So a lot of these countries, I know the Polish Prime Minister, either the current one or the past one, they're very racist. They have no time. They refuse. They flat out. They say we don't want them. They flat out don't need them, don't want them. So they're all fighting. So it says, let me read that again. In June 2024, the European Court of Justice ruled that Hungary must pay a 200 million lump sum fine plus a daily penalty of 1 million for failing to comply with EU asylum law. Of course, that's going to piss them off. Orban said last month that Hungary would rather pay the 1 million per day fine than to allow illegal immigrants in. Damn. Arguing that pain was better than living in fear. Ouch. That pain was better than living in fear. You know, it's funny. They have a quote where the man says, "I rather rule in hell than to be a peasant in the kingdom, than to be a slave in the kingdom." That's one of the things the elites like to say. You see, I forgot who said it now. I'm not going to search it now in the efforts of time's sake. But it says Orban said last month that Hungary would rather pay 1 million per day than fine Salakia than allow immigrants, illegal migrants in, arguing that pain was better than living in fear and promising Hungarians a safe holiday season. Look at this. Christmas markets have been targeted by Islamics, several high-profile attacks in recent years. And this is what they're using right now, because the whole thing now is the whole thing on Islam. Islam is the boogeyman right now. You see, all these nations are saying the same thing. Radical Islamic, radical this, radical that. So this is how they justify. This is how they justify their systems and how they implement what they want to do, because they blaming immigration. I've been, you know, that's a spirit. I've been saying that for a while now, because that's all they're doing, blaming immigrants, right? What happened here? So like it says, let me read the last part. It says the EU has grappled with heavy migration pressure for more than 2 decades. The involvement of European NATO the involvement of European NATO countries in the collapse of Libya and Syria and the backing of Ukraine conflict with Russia has driven millions of people towards the bloc. Yeah, exactly, because they destroy these countries, whether by war, by destabilization, by pillaging, by taking all the resources, whatever they do, they destroy these nations and wonder why people want to come to their countries. You know, there's another article here. Let me just go into it really quick. I'm not going to go in depth on it. But it says, Trump says weak people leading a decaying Europe. Let me read this article here. Wow. Okay, let's see it. It's also by the RT. Oh, today's date as well. It says weak people leading a decaying Europe. America's transatlantic allies are weak and failing to control migration, the United States president said. You see the division? Trump is calling his allies weak. He's calling them weak and saying they're failing to control migration. The U.S. president has said, and this is the talking points to the Edomites, because they want to blame the other nations for destroying their country, changing their country, make the people be in fear, blame the immigrants. The U.S. President Donald Trump has denounced Western Europe as a decaying group of nations led by weak leaders. Remember, I just read Obadiah. All the men that were a confederate with thee have brought thee even to the border. Right? It says, accusing its governments of mishandling migrations and failing to help to end Ukraine conflict. And those nations are so split. They're so divided that some of them want the war. Some of them want to end the war, but ultimately the war is going to generate a lot of money, and of course, if they believe that they can destroy Russia, they will take the spoils. That's what war does. A lot of people don't know that stuff. That's what they want to do. It says, in an interview with Politico published on Tuesday, Trump described the Western Europe political class as an ineffective and overly constrained by what he calls political correctness. I think they're weak, he said. Whew. Of the regional leaders, including Europe, doesn't know what to do. Asked about the role of Western Europe in the Ukraine peace talks, and this is why America, also through the Spirit, is known as the hammer of the whole earth, because America is that nation that's in everyone's business. America is saying it's their way or the highway. This is what they ultimately are saying. It says, asked about the role of Western Europe in Ukraine peace talks, Trump said its leaders talk too much. Man says, he of all people says somebody talks too much. He says talk too much, adding that if they still believe Kiev can win, they are free to keep supporting it as long as they want. He insisted that he has no real enemies in Europe and was on friendly terms with most of his leaders, but he said he knew the good leaders, the bad leaders, the smart ones, and the stupid ones. The man says he knew the good leaders, the bad leaders, the smart ones, and the stupid ones. Man, you got some real stupid ones too, Trump said. These are his allies. These are his allies. Make that make sense. He says Trump argued that European migration policies are pushing some states towards collapse. If it keeps going this way it's going, Europe will not be able. In my opinion, many of those countries will not be viable countries any longer. He said, the immigration policy is a disaster. Their immigration policy is a disaster. What are they doing with the immigration is a disaster. See, he already showed you this stuff. He says he claimed that many European governments are allowing people to enter unchecked, unvetted, and said its leaders refuse to deport those who arrive illegally. What does this sound like? Unchecked and unvetted. The Biden administration, not that long ago, less than 3 years ago, was what? Was allowing thousands and thousands and thousands of so-called illegals to enter America. Now they're unleashing the terror. You see, because this is the thing. This devil needs chaos to function. He needs chaos to operate. He needs to blame somebody. He needs to demonize somebody. He needs to call somebody, basically creating his own adversary. You see? This is what he does. Let me read that again. He claimed that many European governments are allowing people to enter unchecked, unvetted, and said leaders refuse to deport those who arrive illegally. They want to be politically correct, and he says, and they don't want to send them back to where they came from. Trump said he praised Hungary and Poland. It's funny, to the Spirit, I said it about Poland, a prime minister or president recently, ultra racist. He says Trump said he praised Hungary and Poland for their approach to border patrol, contrasting them with other European countries, particularly Germany. And it is no fitting that Germany is on top of the list, because Germany is pulling away from the U.S. Ties. They are separating themselves. He says, particularly Germany, Sweden, and Sweden was one of them neutral countries, always played on the fence, which he said have lost control of migration. Yes, man, but that's what I want to bring out. You know, like I said, I'm out here doing some errands, but I read this and I said, you know what, the Spirit jumped on me. So I want to give all praise. Hope that you've been edified. I want to give all praise, glory, and honor due to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, RAWCHAA, QADASH. Double honors to the elders, the bishops, and the apostles of the great millstone. I hope that you've been edified through the Spirit. I want to give all praise, glory, and honor due to YAHAWAH, BAHASHAM, YAHAWASHI, BAHASHAM, RAWCHAA, QADASH. Shalom.